Hey guys, it's Erin. I wanted to get a message out there about the episode that you're about to hear with Joe Spaulding, who tells us the dangers of dark money. Yes, it's always been a problem, but after we watched as a nation in horror at the attack on our nation's capital and seemingly coordinated at the highest levels of government, dark money isn't just a problem. Dark money is deadly. Please listen in. Welcome to A Plan for That podcast, where each week co-hosts Erin and Ryan will meet with progressive organizers, activists, and leaders. Together, we will educate, invigorate, and elevate the progressive movement. When we unite our voices, an army of progressives is possible. Hey guys, it's Erin, and tonight I am solo because Ryan has a problem with his voice. He just overused it. No worries. He's going to be back in the seat next week. And today I have not only a guest, not only a fabulous political leader, but also a co-host. His name is Joe Spaulding. He, in addition to helping end gerrymandering with a very famous pissed off woman just like myself named Katie, in the movie Slay the Dragon. You have to see the movie, you guys. It's amazing. Slay the Dragon. They helped end gerrymandering at the local level. They got a ballot initiative. Everybody went out and got signatures a la Stacey Abrams style. Woohoo! He's also been a big star in specialty of Michigan politics, holding local governments accountable, making sure that everyone has the right to housing. And yep. I know that he's super excited to talk about organizing, dark money, how it's in our way, what we do to get it out of the way. What do you think, Joe?
I think that we've got a lot of really interesting things to talk about. And I think that we're in the middle of a very, very exciting election as those results are coming back. And there's going to be consequences to that and consequences to the actions going on in places like Pennsylvania when it comes to frankly actions that electeds have taken under the influence of dark money. So all this kind of gets tied together in a nice big bow. So I'm super excited.
It's perfect that you said that, Joe, because I literally was going to call you up and say, okay, I don't know what is going on. On one end of the country, we are celebrating the Constitution and enacting our constitutional right to vote. And across from there, we are blocking the Constitution, throwing people out who were actively and lawfully elected and actually certified as winners from taking their seat. What is going on?
Yeah, and I mean, kind of fortuitously or not, depending on how you look at it, I was just on a town hall phone call with my congressperson, Bill Huizenga. I didn't vote for him, but there he is calling out to mostly folks that he thinks are his supporters. And one of the things that was super interesting to me was, listening to him, it was clear that he was trying to soften the landing for probably certification of Donald Trump that ends up coming to the Electoral College tomorrow with his base, which does lean pretty far right. But I think more importantly was it just seems like they don't have the numbers in Michigan, because Michigan did kind of swing a little bit harder to Joe Biden than Pennsylvania or even Wisconsin did. So it looks like when it comes to the crazy shenanigans that they're trying to pull with the state legislators, they're going to focus on Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and possibly, I think he said Nevada, but he might have misspoke there. But I do know that when it comes to Pennsylvania, they want to make it look like they're making a concerted effort to slate an alternative, push an alternative slate of electors. And I frankly don't think that they're going to be able to pull it off based on a lot of factors, but most recently based on how Representative Huizenga sounded. If they were going to be successful with this strategy, if it sounded like a successful strategy to him, he's the exact type of representative who would line right up in surely bet on. He signed on, for example, the letter that the Texas that came from Texas that tried to sue other states into overturning their election. Yeah, exactly. So if he saw the chance, it would be there. He would take it. So I'm kind of this is desperate grasps, and frankly, to me, this screams gerrymandering, and
right?
I mean, like it's what forces politicians to circle wagons around their base as if it's always a primary where they can get flanked from the right.
See, and now I'm gonna hold you to the fire, because do you know what it screams to me? And I apologize for interjecting, but it's such a heavy hammer that we need to fight, and we need to figure out how to do it. To me, it screams Coke, the Coke empire. That's what it screams to me. Like, pretty much anything that I've learned this past 4 years that I've been fighting against this evil regime, is that basically everything that you hate is because of the Coke machine. It really just seems like that. Am I right, Joe?
No, absolutely, and especially if it's tied to the environment. One of the weird things that you and I talked about offline a little bit, we kind of started brushing up against when we're talking about constitutionalism, is that the Tea Party was, the primary Coke vehicle. Most of that's wasn't when they got their start in politics, but that's when they put all their chips on the table and they started making bets. And the bet of the Tea Party was that if you took weird, Revolutionary War reenacting constitutionalism, and you put it in bed with the at the time conspiracy theory adjacent, but now completely neck deep in conspiracy theory, religious right, that you'd be able to have a populist group that can end up getting elected to Congress. We saw that with Paul Ryan's as Speaker of the House there for a while, which those were great fun times.
I'm telling you. I'm really glad that you brought up his little weaselly name, because I'm here to tell you, listeners, if anyone thinks they're going to rehab their personalities and try to pretend like they weren't the monster that they were, we're going to hold them accountable, aren't we, Joe? We're going to make sure that everyone remembers exactly who they are and exactly what they did.
Yep. The internet and video are forever. So... Yeah.
Exactly right. So here's my question, because I know that you have a huge hook into the DeVos and Coke, evil that plays out nationally, but I heard you mention it in a past conversation. It even plays out locally. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, I've got fun stories. Betsy DeVos and I are from the same hometown, Holland, Michigan. And this used to be the hotbed of religious conservatism. There's a couple demographic things that have changed, but like George W. Bush kicked off his campaign in Michigan here, his re-election campaign.
Yeah.
And Trump was counting on Holland being this place where he could leverage some sort of religious legitimacy to his presidency. Yeah, no, I know it's insane, But all it takes for some folks, especially when it comes to Calvinism, which thinks that God literally preordains everything, they think that God can use a person like Donald Trump as a vehicle for that. So the story when it comes to the DeVos money is they had a lockdown on the mayor's seat here. And I noticed when we were running the gerrymandering campaign that they only won by 126 votes. To me, that's something that if I felt compelled without any other help, I could knock doors and make sure that went the other way. I was busy amending the state constitution of Michigan at the time. So this next run through in 2019, I found out the man who's running is local attorney, Nathan Fox. I talked to him. He seemed really with it. He was great. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016, but he wasn't out there saying that everywhere. And he was just a really good guy. Wanted to run against Nancy DeBoer, who, in my opinion, is the person who made the deciding vote in my hometown against a protection ordinance for LGBTQ folks. Anyway, The short story on the DeVos influence is, she's friends with Betsy, and Betsy had a dark money campaign where they tried to smear Nathan Box as some sort of raging socialist. We're talking about $135,000, $150,000 in a mayor's race in a city of 33,000 people.
Right.
So, you can do the math on that. And, I helped Nathan out as much as I could. And he ended up winning that race by 490 votes. And then, so to kind of bring that all back to spoiling Trump's plans and spoiling Betsy's plans is there's some famous photos of Lev Parnas, convicted felon Lev Parnas, and Rudy Giuliani and Bill Huizenga, my representative, and then former Senate candidate John James at the Civic Center in downtown Holland. That was the Republican Party's play for religious legitimacy in 2018. Instead of Trump hanging out at a city-sanctioned event on city property, this year Mike Pence had to go to a bowling alley. So it was just absolutely, it's amazing how much those local elections, those local things can impact the bigger picture in places.
Absolutely.
And when you kind of scope back out, Ottawa County, where my hometown is famously Republican. This past election, it swung 9 points more. It's still a Republican county, but it swung 9 points towards the Democrats. So
now
that's pretty good.
I'm glad that you're in the weeds and talking about the numbers, because I want to remind you, if you haven't already listened, listener and Joe, if you haven't already listened, please do listen to our episode last time with Pam Keith. It is the title, A Plan for Progressive Power. The reason I'm going to bring this up to you, Joe, I thought of you immediately when she said it, because I thought, oh, she just said something smart and he knows how to implement it. So here we go. Pam said that the reason the Republicans are going full dictatorship, trying to overthrow democracy itself, and, throwing John Fetterman out of the state legislation so that they can unseat people who are duly and lawfully elected, is because, and here it is, the majority of voters are against the Republican Party. They are not with the Republican Party. The majority is not okay with what they're doing, is not okay with their agenda, and is not in line with what their vision for the country is. So if that's true, we have some power that we need to talk about, Joe.
No, this is absolutely right. And I think that's an understatement. I think it's a super majority, and I think it's growing. And I think that the places it's growing from, if you look at it from the million-foot level, it's terrifying if you care about the future of the Republican Party, because at the end of the day, a political party is only as good as the strategists that are calling the shots and the people that are flaking off. And you can talk about their efficacy in getting needles, but they're some of the best political messengers in terms of getting people elected who might not be able to do it on their own. The Lincoln Project type folks in Michigan, their consultant is Jeff Timmer. He's his emails show up in Slay the Dragon. He just wrote a really, really good essay where he talks. There's a mea culpa in the middle of it where he talks about his role in drawing gerrymandered districts, and he says that even these gerrymanders aren't holding because of exactly what you spoke about, was that the folks that just aren't siding with the Republicans. The Republicans have completely shifted. And what church did they build their rock on when they started amassing power into the Tea Party? It was constitutionalism on one level, which they've completely thrown out the window, and then banning gay marriage, which is, it's terrifying thought, especially with the Supreme Court the way it is, not yet packed. And but at the same time, even banning gay marriage is untenable in most places inside the Republican Party with most Republicans. You can't say that to most Connecticut Republicans. They'll think that you want to lose elections at the best. So.
And so here's what I'm hearing as the untrained, just, consumer of knowledge and watching the events unfold as they do. What I'm seeing, and this is going to be something good to digest as we go to break after our little talk here. So we've got some major pros, is what I'm hearing. We've got a huge pro in that the country is going our way as Democrats. They want change. They want equality. They want justice. They want economic justice. They want environmental justice. These are popular things. So here we come, devil's advocate time. Now they paint us as socialists that are going to destroy the world and take all the things that we were saying that we still espouse and that are still popular and make them very scary. Is that about what's going on?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what will go on, and they will try to start that push against socialism. They'll continue to, there are fights we're losing too. Like they'll continue to try to take chunks out of unions. They'll continue to try to push back against public schools. And frankly, they might have a little bit more success if they can get a figurehead that's not as unpopular as Betsy DeVos. So, but like all of these things are things that we can be aware of. I think that the important thing is to make sure that we kind of have a firm understanding of defining victory, both in terms of policy and in terms of politics.
Yep.
And I think that the big bet with Donald Trump, which, a lot of people don't want to remember this, but I know it personally from like seeing this campaign tactic like work successfully in other places. But, Hillary Clinton really did put her thumb on the scale during the Republican primary to make sure she was running against him, who she thought she had the best chance of beating. And she was probably, on some level, maybe she was right, but she didn't pull it off, and we're stuck with Trump. So, and maybe it's because I'm raised Catholic and I want to see that, kind of God balancing things out or whatever it is in the universe. But if there's going to be some sort of redemption for the fact that our country had to suffer through that, and I do mean that literally, because there's 350,000 dead people and their families that we can look at when it comes to how badly Donald Trump failed. Any type of redemption has to come from the fact that the Republican Party is eating itself alive and it's going to fall in half. And just reaching back to college political theory, it's happened before. It's not unreasonable to expect, in the best possible world, for a very rapid shift, because there's a very gradual shift to that level of conservatism, but a very rapid and hopefully on some level still controlled, but shift towards the entire whole polarity of politics in this country orbiting around centrist and left. That's a very difficult balance, because as soon as we're in that space, you're absolutely right. There's room for people to scream socialism as loud as they can and hope that they're scarier than anybody else.
So I can't wait to get your thoughts on Pam Keith's next golden nugget, because I'm telling you, man, she had some fire, and I want to ask you about it. So listeners, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll catch you right as we come back.
As a lifelong New Yorker, a mom, and as someone who has worked my entire career to increase access to opportunity for communities of color, I've been so proud to be a part of our city's calls for justice around systemic racism. Now's the time for us to change the broken systems we have lived with all of our lives. We can make history in this extraordinary moment. We are ready to create a new social justice compact where every New Yorker has an opportunity to succeed and thrive. But that requires sustained energy, focused purpose, and honest, bold leadership. I've already been the first mayoral candidate to join with countless others in calling for divesting resources from the police and investing them in the people. I am committed to putting an end to the racist and oppressive systems that are failing all of us. But that's just a start. As we lead, so shall others follow. We are New Yorkers. We can do this. Together.
So as we were going on to break, I just almost was so excited I couldn't stop talking about it during our offline moment. And Joe, Pam Keith is right. We are not great with messaging, and we have such a wonderful platform. I mean, everybody likes it. It tests well. 80% of the country, believe it or not, you guys, go look up my facts. I know what I'm talking about. 80% of the country describes themselves as quote unquote progressive when it came to the issues. What I mean when I say that is that when voters were answering questions in a poll. It wasn't a poll on are you progressive? It was a question of what do you feel about this issue? What are your statements toward this feeling? How quickly would you like to see this change? And what I'm telling you is the results are progressive. Everybody is answering as a progressive person. So how can we be so bad at messaging, Joe? Help us, please.
So one of the things, I kind of have a few different approaches to messaging. One of my key guidelines is that I think everybody's terrible at messaging. And I think that the amount that people are bad at messaging is in proportion to how much they are, how much affinity they have for the truth. So,
okay.
And because, getting at things like accuracy these are things that are difficult to convey to 100%, right? So everything's always an approximation, and you have folks on the left that can frankly give you an essay on any topic and still can't tell you anything, and it's encouraged society-wide, and I think that it is good to have good ideas. I think it's really good to have smart ideas, especially when we're writing policy. I think that when we're talking to folks, especially when we're super interested or, working in politics, frankly, somebody who thinks about politics 2 times a year and once when he's Googling the candidates and then the other time when he's in the booth filling the circles, I think that those people can vote and their vote counts just as much as everybody else's.
Yeah.
So for me, it really is important to start with an open mind when it comes to messaging about stuff. And so maybe folks aren't tuned into politics at all, but you can make anything about a political decision. If someone doesn't care about for whatever reason, they're probably super privileged. They don't care about politics, but they're still willing to go vote. They will absolutely vote for anybody if you do something nice for them and then you tell them to vote for somebody. And that can be it. Right. It doesn't have to be anything about the candidate. And Democrats forget this. They think that they have to claw and fight and scrape intellectually in order to frankly beat people into submission in order to make them vote the right way. And I think that when you come to Republicans, on the consultant side, extraordinarily unscrupulous.
Yeah. Well, and I want to pause because that is so important. That brings back something that I said on our episode to Pam, where we were talking about this is the way it is. Like on the right, you basically just say, I love America, hug the flag, be a good Christian, vote. That's it.
Yep.
And then on our side, we got to talk about issues. We got to talk about how it affects you. We got to this, we got to that. And Pam quite rightly said, the reason that we have to fight 5 times harder on a message is because the right has Fox News, brainwashing the public every single day. So you don't have to have a message. All you have to be is anti-socialist.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's sufficient. But it's cracking. There are ways to talk about socialism even that are a lot more impervious, especially if people are only prepped by talking points that they learned on Fox News, because frankly, some people can imagine hating Soviet Russia and wanting to punch Stalin in the face, but at the same time, they've also had to make choices between paying rent or buying groceries, or they've had to watch family members, not eat meals because they have bills to pay, and these are personal experiences that almost every working class American tragically has, and that we can have these as conversational touchstones, and the best grassroots direct voter contact programs build on this action. And again, I can't. I guess let's think back to the primary, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers because I had kind of a spread of candidates that I was super into in this. But from a messaging standpoint, Elizabeth Warren did go at Pete Buttigieg on the wine cave thing, and there are ways, there are specific ways that you can message that in order to go at the pretension of having the event somewhere ritzy. But like, this is non-political, and this is the problem, because Elizabeth Warren's folks understood everything political. Like, there's
Right.
nothing like planned for everything. But the non-political thing was the damaging thing a little bit there. And that's that it's something like 58% of people, if you put a glass of wine, a shot of whiskey, and a beer in front of them, they'll pick the glass of wine. They consider
Right.
themselves, and it's got to be close to 150% of that for her supporters. And so if people are kind of deciding between which two, and they were kind of like, Pete's thing was getting in her lane. It was annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the voters are out there deciding, getting introduced to these two for the first time, and the only thing that they figure out that one of them's kind of like, well, I don't like it if you go to Napa and drink wine. That's just like, you're going to win or lose the primary in California. Probably. You probably shouldn't be talking bad about Napa. But that's not political at all. It's not.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
It just helps because this is the other thing that I learned at Pam's heels. I learned that politics lately is really personality, Yep. And so if you feel like you belong to the party, awesome. But if you feel like you belong to the opposite party, then that's what happens. And here's one of the things that I just cannot understand. I cannot reconcile this. And Ryan and I have talked at length. He and I are neck and neck on this one. We do not understand how you can call yourselves the party of Christianity, okay? And we're talking about the right. And then hate the poor, make everyone suffer, only care about rich people. I mean, literally, that is the policy. The policy is everything for me, nothing for you. Too bad, so sad, whatever.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And this is kind of my thing as an organizer, my leg up when it came to writing the messaging for the gerrymandering campaign.
Yes, please.
Was that I was raised in a community that's heavily religiously right.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised Catholic. To get an idea of the dynamics in the community, that was frowned upon by a lot of folks because it wasn't Dutch conservative. It wasn't Dutch Reformed Church. Mm-hmm. And my Catholic upbringing was different than most. I did some work in St. Louis, and I ran into people with some very different upbringings inside the church than I had, which was almost entirely social justice oriented and service-based oriented. We never heard about fire or brimstone because, frankly, if the folks wanted that, they could just go down the road to any of the many Dutch Reformed churches.
Right.
So, yeah. and so the area is extraordinarily Christian. And I was the kid in catechism with my hand up all the time. So I was just trying to figure out why my classmates, frankly, didn't like me very much. And maybe
now I know why we get along. Sorry. Yes, that was me too. Yeah. I was like, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, when it comes to these religious discussions, like, anyone that's trying to invoke the Bible, I'm more than welcome to do that. But I've read it a lot, and I'm going to be making sure we're talking about the book of Matthew. I'm making sure that we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount and camels not being able to go through the eye of the needle and rich people not being able to get to the kingdom of heaven. We're talking about the real meaning of the parable of the talents. We can go at any depth, especially when it comes to the Gospels, but I'll do the Old Testament too. But there's not a lot of Democrats that can do that anymore. I don't think that being Bible fluent is a necessary skill. I just think that when you're running a campaign statewide in a state like Michigan, Montana, even Minnesota, Missouri, Indiana, or Ohio, or Pennsylvania, I think it's super helpful. So
yes, and I would agree with you. So what do you think about Ryan and Maya's idea? We were, just kind of throwing things back and forth like we do. And I said, what if we start something, at least, a portion? This is not our total message, but it's a portion of who we are and what we stand for as the progressive left, quote unquote. But honestly, I think it's a lot more people than you realize. What if we start talking about live your faith? Like, live those principles, because I'm going to tell you, the other side can't do that. They don't live those principles, and it's very, very easy to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that there's a bigger discussion that's outside of just religion, and that's frankly integrity.
Right?
And
Morality. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and Democrats again, that's another soft spot when it comes to messaging, is that they don't want to speak about values and say that this is something that we all should have and hold as sacred. Freedom, individuality, even these types of things are not. It's funny that I just said individuality, because that's kind of like the other side of that coin. There is that the left does call for more collective support of everybody, making sure
Yep.
that we all take care of each other.
Yep.
And
How is that bad?
no,
But yeah.
it's great, but when it comes to language, it's not congruent, because we're
Yep.
terrified of, and I don't think this. I don't know exactly what the origins are, but we're terrified of saying that this is a value, like this, whatever we want to define justice. We can barely even say it about justice. But this is a value that everybody should uphold and do everything they can to make sure we have available to every American. The right is the exact opposite, because their values don't require any type of interaction, and they're all just completely derived, or they all devolve back into individualism. So they just want everybody to have freedom, which is that is still a value, and they're able to speak to that. They can say that. It's paradoxical, but they're like, everybody should have freedom, and we should, literally stop people from being free in order to make sure everybody else is free enough.
I know,
But,
and it's such an anachronism, because in order to be free, you have to have a voice, and they literally try to squash everybody's voice. And there's this idea of conformity, right? So if you don't believe like they do, if you don't want the same things, then you're upsetting and you're dangerous.
yeah, and and not just it's not just upsetting or dangerous. They definitely. It's so weird how fast they deploy the full reactionary arc or spectrum of what they consider to be bad politics. And so anybody that disagrees with them about healthcare policy, for instance, is literally stalling.
Yep.
And it's but again, it's because their framework is all freedom centric, and it's because they're not used to having to compare a value against another value. And you can see that very easily when they start trying to talk about free speech as if it's a right that exists in a vacuum, and they don't think that they have. Or they also think that it extends beyond the government. So it's weird. I think that we should confront them directly on those concepts, but we don't talk about values as such. We talk about the need for justice, but we don't say justice is our collective value, and it's important because it means that everybody gets their due, and it allows society to actually function and trust each other.
So what about this, Joe? Because I'm tossing this around, again, as a neophyte, just kind of trying to see what sticks when you throw things at the wall. There seems to be a huge consensus on the idea of anti-corruption. And I'm telling you this as someone who did volunteer on the Elizabeth Warren campaign. One of the things that we saw, and people still to this day don't believe us, and the volunteers, I know you're with me. I know you're going to say I'm right, because this is what we saw. We saw the people who we were texting who were in support of her. Now, I don't want to get into the whole Bernie Warren fight and all of that nonsense, because that was terrible, and it did not do very good things for either candidate. But prior to all of that, what we were seeing, I kid you not, was Democrats loved her because of anti-corruption. Independents loved her because of anti-corruption. And yes, even Trump voters, I kid you not, I talked to them, I know. People who voted for him in 2016 are mad because he didn't deliver the promises that she was ready to deliver and that he lied about. And chief among those was drain the swamp.
No, absolutely. I like to think about popularity of policy and politicians in four dimensions, and you can anticipate that when we have a Republican president getting replaced by a Democratic president, we'll have a portion of the population that thinks that the federal government is good, and they'll cross over and think that the federal government is no longer good, and vice versa. Every 4 or 8 years, that's like something that you can anticipate. But I think that part of that, and then happening on the side of that, is most Americans really just fundamentally, it's not hard for them to believe that any individual member of government is corrupt, and it's even less difficult for them to think that government is a corrupting force for the individuals that participate in it. So it's easy to tell those narratives. And I can say one of my favorite things about messaging anti-gerrymandering is that if you're trying to get folks to sign a petition and you want to get them to sign it, and I'm going to use Mission cities here because that's where we were, but you try to get them to sign it in Flint, or you try to get them to sign it in Baxter neighborhood in Grand Rapids, you try to get them to sign it in Detroit, or you try to get them to sign it in Battle Creek, you can use the same pitch that you can use in the middle of the Upper Peninsula in Munising or Escanaba or Ishpeming. And you can just say, politicians are crooked and corrupt. They manipulate elections. Sign my petition. And 99% of the people will sign the petition.
Yeah.
because that's just it. That's just how folks think. And you're absolutely right. It's my favorite thing about Elizabeth Warren was anti-corruption. And I think that, to kind of wrap that back to something that we were talking about earlier, when it comes to showing up to local elections and making sure politicians as a culture understand that we're living with the internet, we're living with video. Paul Ryan can't just jump in and pretend that he's always understood Rage Against the Machine and liked what they've been saying.
Yeah.
We're going to hold these folks accountable to the words that they have said, the actions that they've done, and the damage that they've caused, frankly. And I think that having that be a pervasive culture is important. And I guess the last little bit I'll throw in is that when I think about local elections and I think about their relationship to bigger elections,
yes,
you look at someone like AOC, and going from bartender to Congress is one heck of a Disney, story. It's just that doesn't happen, and that's wonderful. And maybe it should happen more. But the entirety of the system, because of money in politics, more than anything, it makes that super difficment.
Well, and I'm so glad that you said it makes everything difficult, because that's where I'm at with policy. One of the things that I thought about saying, Joe, and this might even be a petition conversation, who knows? But if you say to someone, hey, do you want to know why nothing's changed and why you're getting upset because year after year, Washington is more in quote unquote gridlock than ever before? I mean, you listen to any news channel and they'll tell you that all day. It's big money. That's what it is. It's the people who are getting the money to not do the things that you want them to do. Correct?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. And it's, I guess there's a lot of language that goes along with that, but it goes back to the Kochs and the DeVosses and just the influence that these folks try to do. And it's not just the policies that these folks, the billionaire class, want to have passed that causes the damage. It's the ways that they try to get these policies passed. When you go back and you look at the Tea Party in 2010 as this unholy alliance between the Koch brothers at the time with very hardline anti-environmentalism that was packaged as pro-business and willing to ride the tide of populist, frankly, deeply religious, almost fundamentalist conservatism. Yeah. And what happened? Well, the DeVosses were playing in that game too. They chose to side with the more religious leaning side, and the Koch brothers completely got capsized inside the Republican Party, and so their influence once suffered, but it doesn't matter because the damage had been done, and it wasn't just their policies that let them clear cut forests so they could make more Dixie cups and paper towels. It was the fact that in order to do it, they had an unholy alliance that resulted, frankly, in laying the groundwork that allowed Donald Trump to get elected. And everything that we're seeing now is because of that.
Thank you. Thank you. He is a symptom, you guys. He is not the disease. And the problem is, did we do a good job getting rid of him? Hell yes, we did. The problem is, we aren't done. There is more work to do. We can't just say, oh, well, he's gone, so every single thing that created him is just dandy now. No, it isn't. And this is my thing with Joe. Joe, I love you. Stop saying that everything's going back to normal. It can't, it can't, it can't. Normal was bad. We didn't start at a good place, right, Joe?
Yep. So that was the other Joe you were talking about just then, because
Joe Biden.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'll happily have I with Joe posters up in my place. I think that's funny, but yeah.
Right.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the Dave Chappelle hosted Saturday Night Live right after Trump won in 2016.
Yeah.
And one of the sketches there, he was just laughing at all his white friends for being surprised that America was frankly that racist. And that's the reality, is that we lived in a different status quo. And my big hope with this world that we are in now is that it's not just that we got rid of Trump. It's that we got rid of Trump, and and unfortunately, we lost George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but we went through a very important summer of protests, direct action.
Amen.
And it wasn't just noise in the street. A lot of folks got registered to vote. A lot of real good work got done because of that. And
yes.
my heart tells me, and my hope is all in the basket of, we're living in a world that hasn't changed yet, but is rapidly changing in a good way.
Yes.
And I don't think that Joe Biden is going to be able to ignore that, especially on January 21st, when we frankly start holding his feet to the fire. And there's a lot of good reasons why we should be doing that, especially in the first 100 days. But, in my opinion, the first 700 days of his presidency, I think that's fair game. I think round the corner past up to midterms, we should be a little bit more careful. But we need to see how much putting pressure on him can do, because he got more votes than anybody else that's ever run for president, and he did it because he wasn't Donald Trump more than any other reason. But it wasn't people that just barely didn't like Donald Trump. It was people that felt like if we kept going in the direction of the right, our country could lead us off a literal cliff. And I mean us, I mean human life on this planet.
We're still there. I posted this on Twitter the other day, and it is, if you guys are interested in it, it's on my @wellness4u13. That's @wellness, the number 4u13. And it is a picture from Dr. Timothy Snyder. Dr. Timothy Snyder is somebody who understands fascism. He has a book called On Tyranny, and he came out pretty early, honestly, in the Trump administration, warning about the signs of fascism. And people can, laugh it off all you want, but here they are. You ready, Joe?
Yep.
Powerful and continuing nationalism. Check. Disdain for human rights? Check. Yep. Identification of enemies as a unifying cause? Check. Supremacy of the military? Check. Yep. Rampant sexism? Obviously, check.
Wow.
Controlled mass media? Check.
Yep.
Obsession with national security? Check. Religion and government intermingle? Check and check. Mm-hmm. Corporate power protection. So it's all about the corporations. Yes, check. Labor power is suppressed. Check.
Yep.
Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. I'm telling you right now, I noticed something was going on, Joe, when 10 years ago, members of my own family in a certain other area of the country were upset that I went to college. I was an elitist show off, and anyway. So, disdain for intellectuals, check. Obsession with crime and punishment, Check.
Yep.
And we just killed a whole bunch of people before we could even get the FDA to sign off on killing drugs. Check, check. Thank you, Bill Barr. Rampant cronyism and corruption every day, every minute, every hour. And last, fraudulent elections. And I'm not saying that we had one. I'm saying that they're pushing that narrative.
Yeah. So this is going to, I'm going to try to say this without getting too meta, but,
right.
but pretending that an accurate and fair election was fraudulent is an attempt to make the election fraudulent.
Right.
So that's absolutely what the attempt. And obviously, and this has been said by a billion other people, maybe better than me, but the saving grace of the Trump administration when it comes to the ability of humanity to survive is its incompetence. And we know for a fact that the next fascist dirtbag that tries to do the same stuff is going to be more charismatic, is going to be frankly less sexist, less racist, and but maybe not much. But they're going to try to soften the edges a little bit, but still get all of those corporatist and possibly and probably all of those religious adjacent policies passed that restrict other folks, restrict the freedom. So.
See, I'm so glad you brought that up because, and I'm going to make some enemies here, but I'm doing it. I'm ready to just get the work done, okay? So I would argue we already had one, and his name was Ronald Reagan. He was a quiet racist. He was an acceptable racist. So, yeah. And no, I did not vote for him, and I did not find him acceptable. But I'm just saying that he's like the hero of the damn party. Every time they want to look good, they talk about him.
Yeah, and I mean, he absolutely would be not in California, but he would be a moderate Democrat. He's to the left of Joe Manchin. So today, politically, he could be a legacy Republican. He could be the last, like a John McCain type. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, his who he was and things that he said would make him untenable inside the Democratic Party outside of West Virginia, and what he believed politically, especially when it comes to things like banning assault weapons and not kicking out every person of color in this country if they seem like they might be Latino. Those two things would make him pretty untenable as a nationwide candidate within the Republican Party. So, yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. He still is racist. He still is more charismatic than Trump.
Yeah, all you have to do is listen to his old speeches, and I got interested in it, so I pulled him up, of course. Thank you, YouTube. He says things like urban crime. Well, I know exactly what that's about, and it's a racist ass thing to say. It's just, it's next level. So here's what I'm working on now with a pretty exciting new project that we have bubbling in the background. We're not talking about it in the open just yet, so hang on, guys. We're talking about how everything, and Joe, you back me up on this or counteract me if you need to, but every large media, and I kid you not, I've watched them all, they all deify the center. They say that the far right is untenable and the far left is untenable, and where we all need to be is moderate. Everyone needs to be moderate, okay? Now, here's the problem with that, and it's really easy to explain if you get people who will listen to you. The problem with that is moderate means status quo. Okay, the right wants to regress. They want to go back to like the 1930s. Okay, they've made that clear. The left wants everything to be overthrown and turned into, I don't know, sometimes kind of anarchy. I'm talking far left now. I'm not talking progressive left. And then the progressives want change. That's what we want. And we have the things that we want to change, and we can name them. So it's not okay for us to be moderate, which is the status quo, when the status quo is people have no homes. When the status quo is people are fighting to survive economically. When the status quo is people are living check to check And down the street in a different part of the neighborhood, I've got mansions that look, Joe, I kid you not, like two regular single family homes attached to one another as one freaking house. It's untenable. We can't have this level of inequality and then say, let's just be moderate though. Everything's fine.
I can tell you horror stories about city governments like the city councils in Palo Alto or Cupertino, where Apple is, and just bending over backwards to let people put up these big mansions, 7 bedrooms, all that, and doing everything that they can to make sure that there's not a single apartment that gets built anywhere within their city limits, because they don't want to have the types of people that would live in an apartment in their city. But they'll happily get served a beer by them, obviously. So,
of course.
Yeah.
They're allowed to be God, we're almost at the proletariat. I mean, come on. This is really getting... And for those of you who didn't read 1984 obsessively out of fear, the proletariat is the workers, the party of workers. That's all we are. And what I said, Joe, when our, quote unquote leaders, and yes, I'm mad at my side too, came out with this $600 nonsense, I said, you know what? Maybe we're going about this the wrong way, since everybody seems to have been bought and paid for in Washington. Maybe we should stop talking about how this is an atrocity to human rights and dignity. Maybe we should just say, hey, I can't buy stuff. Do you want the economy to function? So...
I wish I was a talented baker, because then I would be able to put a cake together in the shape of a rectangle and make it into a nice $600 check on top of that. And make
right. It's just I can't even with the level. And then of course at the same time, just like the house down the block from me, you guys, it's not really down the block, it's on the other side of town. Yes, I'm from the quote unquote bad side of the tracks, i.e. middle class, or we used to be, now we're the almost broke middle class. It's the same story, because while people are getting $600 as, survival money, it is not stimulus. Let's get that right. You've got the other people, the Bezoses of the world and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, who I just want to bash in the face because they've made $1 trillion all amongst them. It just, so... Yeah.
And no, it's frustrating. And I think that from our perspective, when we try to change things, it makes it very difficult to empathize with them on any level. It's difficult to empathize with a billionaire. And I think that's tactically dangerous for us, because you have to be able to empathize with anybody that's participating, and they have a lot of power in terms of politics, which is unfortunate. It's something we want to change. But we have to, in some level, be able to get in their shoes. And I think that it's very easy for us, when it comes to money in politics, to think about the corrupting influence of money on the legislatures and the elected officials, because they take essentially a bribe, although we don't call them bribes anymore because we're polite, I guess. And and then they have their opinions on policy influence based on who's giving them cash. Everyone's smart enough to figure out what their friends like.
Right.
But when it comes to the billionaires, like, what are they getting out of this thing? Why do they want the moderates? Like, what's the appeal of the political status quo from them? And it's got to be financial, clearly. Yeah, but like for them, they benefit from the system where they're able, and this is the thing that can actually sell it, because it shows how just backwards and corrupt the whole thing is. Corporations all want to be big enough where they can put money in the pockets of both candidates that are running in a general election and know that their tails are covered no matter who wins. Yeah. That's the system they want, because they want certainty. They don't want any types of risk. They don't want a candidate that might go against them. They want to be able to buy off both candidates. And so when it comes to the corporations, it does come down to the two-party system. And so, we got to shake it up. And I think that that's something that people can latch onto. They don't like people saying that they're betting on both sides. It's no different than, I'm a huge Detroit Lions fan. I hate the Green Bay Packers with every fiber of my being. Mm-hmm. If I found out that somebody was just like trying to say that they were the best Lions fan in the universe and we should elect them president of the Lions fan club, and they put equal bets on the Lions and the Packers on a Thanksgiving game, we would throw them in the Detroit River and make sure they bobbed up and down at least 5 times.
Right?
It just, people do not like that. So you can say that like they're playing both sides, and that's something that needs to be brought up when we talk about a constitutional amendment to end Citizens United. And the little cherry on top of this sundae is that we need to have those concrete goals, and they're not pie in the sky. We need to have Medicare for all. We need to have those policies, frankly, the Bernie, giving his credit, his policy goals, Medicare for all, college tuition, and living wage. But, we also have to overturn Citizens United. We have to end the Electoral College, and we have to stop gerrymandering.
Damn right. So, and here's the thing. The people who are talking about that are progressive. I'm not hearing moderates talk about that. And so if these are the things that we need to make our government work for the people, okay, it's not just a hashtag. You have to show me what you're doing. And yes, I'm going to piss off some people who are Team Nancy right now. I was Team Nancy. I was one of the people saying, wait a minute. She's really smart. Maybe she sees something we don't see. And honestly, I gotta say, the level of begging her on a daily basis to save our freaking world is just next level for me. And I'm a little bit more inclined to look at people like Ayanna Pressley, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey. Those are the people who are saying, hey, here's 17 investigations I just opened up. That's Elizabeth Warren. Hey, here's what I'm demanding our Republican counterparts do because I'm not accepting A, B, and C. That's AOC. And Ayanna Pressley, who just refuses to sit down, even though people tell her, no, this can't happen. No, this won't pass. And she's ready to fight. And now we have Cori Bush, Jamal, Mondaire Jones, so many people. The army is growing. So let's take a quick breather, celebrate that moment. And then Joe is going to tell us, where do we go from here? It's going to be exciting. See you soon.
For the last 10 years, I've been a public defender here in Manhattan. I've represented over 3,000 New Yorkers, people who didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer. I fight for justice for them. My name's Eliza Orlins, and I'm running for Manhattan District Attorney. Every day in court, I fight against a criminal legal system that's cruel and unjust, one that's rigged for the rich and powerful, and against everyone else. A system that fails us, that devastates Black, brown, and low-income communities, that tears families apart, that hurts innocent victims, and that does not keep us safe. We can do better. We must. I know the system from the inside, so I know we can't change the system unless we change the DA. That's why I'm running to be your next Manhattan District Attorney. Join me in the fight.
Hey guys, I am super excited for this last part of our show today because Joe and I have been talking, and this is my personal goal, and I really hope you'll join me in this fight. We're not just electing an army of progressives. We are running a stealth campaign right now because I said to Ryan, what if they're expecting us to go to sleep now that we've won the presidency? And what if we do the opposite? What if we stay engaged, stay focused, go local, and organize the hell out of this thing so they never see us coming and we win it all? Joe, how do we get it done?
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you that's exactly what our strategy was in 2016, 2017 when we ended gerrymandering, and I can say that this is one of the best ideas that I've heard in a very long time when it comes to grassroots activism. The techniques for talking to voters and making sure that we're having an impact are becoming better when it comes to their longevity, and they're becoming better on an issues basis, which means that we don't need to have a partisan party structure sending us out knocking on doors to have powerful, impactful conversations. A friend of mine, David Fleischer, works at the Leadership Lab in LA. It's the LGBTQ Leadership Lab, and they developed he developed this neuroscience-based technique of canvassing that has this impact that lasts at least 9 months, although we don't know how long it lasts. It's called deep canvassing. A lot of campaigns are leaning in that direction. There's been a lot of work talking about that, but I think that kind of stuff that gets lost in the shuffle and all of that is that it's super effective if it's used on a specific issue, especially if that issue hasn't been entrenched in partisanship. One of the beautiful things about the technique when it came to gerrymandering was that we could have these conversations with people, and they would all be in the context of politicians being corrupt, and they need to be kept in check, and our policy is a way to do that. And they'd be telling us stories about when they either witnessed or were hurt by somebody in power. It could have been a boss that acted in a corrupt way, that directly hurt them or someone that they cared about. And they would tell us these stories and associate it with the corruption that we would talk about, because we would describe some of the problems of gerrymandering, and there were a lot of problems, so we had a lot to choose from in very similar terms to the story that they gave us. Wow. The end result, the end result is these folks were absolutely hooked. And to kind of make it a little bit better, when we got our polling back initially on that issue, the issue of gerrymandering, we found that Trump supporters specifically didn't actually need to have that entirety of the deep canvas. If the issue was like gerrymandering, it was unfamiliar enough to the person you're talking to, they'll, and they're a Trump supporter, that type, they will side with the first position on the issue that they hear, more often than not. And they are actually persuadable if you get to them first, which is something that you don't normally see. But then you add the deep canvassing effect, and because it has that kind of pivotal change inside of people with that longevity, you know that those folks are going back and having that conversation with other people. And it's about a topic that no one else is talking about. So they're going to have that topic conversation with their friends who are shallowly interested in politics. And they're going to have that same impact of being converted because the first thing they heard was in support. So we definitely took advantage of that when it came to gerrymandering, and we definitely focused that tactic specifically on Ottawa County, where I live, where I'm from, where Betsy DeVos is from, and where Joe Biden moved the needle 9 points from where Hillary Clinton had it in 2016. So, because we don't have congruent data with the Democratic Party, because we're nonpartisan, there's no way to really track the exact impact of the deep canvassing program in Ottawa County. But there's very little else to explain what happened from an attitudinal perspective countywide there. Because frankly, the Democratic Party doesn't invest in that entire side of the state very much in Michigan, because they can win in Oakland, Wayne, Ingham, and Macomb County to some degree, I guess increasingly.
So I know we're at the micro level, but now I'm going to bounce out to macro, not to confuse everybody, but I have a burning question and I have to ask. What if somebody who knew what the hell they were doing, like Stacey Abrams, was at the DNC? How would that change things, do you think?
I don't know. I think that would be probably very good. I think that getting people with organizing experience on the ground, higher levels, is always good for that type of infrastructure. I think, frankly, we need more people like Stacey Abrams in more states.
Yes, clone her. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a tough balance, because we shouldn't be waiting around for heroes. We should be being the change that we want to see in the world. And I think that it's so hard when you have somebody that puts that much effort in and does it so effectively, to not lionize them, not put them on a pedestal. And I think we need to give credit where it's due. I think we should definitely elevate Stacey Abrams, but when it comes to what should our 1,000-foot goal there be, I think it should be creating the ways to create these folks. And when we talk about what we can do at the more micro, bring it back to the micro level, Katie Fahey worked at an institute that focused on recycling. It's a small office in Michigan. They had a staff of three or four that were there every day when she made a Facebook post and started this thing. And she's now running nonprofit called The People. They do some really good democratic work, but she's now a player when it comes to moving the needle and helping get real work done across the board and frankly saving this country. So
yes, now let's back up just a minute because you and I love her and we know exactly who she is and what you're referring to. But our listeners haven't watched Slay the Dragon, but they will right after this. So tell them who Katie is and how she is a pissed off lady that I love.
Yeah, and she's fiery and she's amazing. And she's now, I think she's like 29, 30. She was a 27-year-old woman in Michigan who was really upset about Donald Trump winning, and she made a Facebook post saying that she wanted to take on gerrymandering and invited all her friends to do that. About 5,000 people responded. It got shared around the Michigan chapter of Pantsuit Nation on Facebook, if people are familiar.
Go, and Katie!
And it snowballed into this campaign that ended up amending the state constitution and ending gerrymandering. Like Erin said, it's like you said, it's in a documentary, Slay the Dragon, and that's available on any streaming service if you want to give them cash. But you can watch it if you have Hulu. They just have it up there, and you can see us do the work, see me get my hair cut, and see Katie transform from an everyday person who posts on Facebook into a person who probably had one of the biggest, by the time I die, will have had one of the biggest positive impacts that one person has had on the politics of the country.
Yes, exactly. So let's do this, guys. Let's go watch Slay the Dragon. Let's pay attention to everything that it teaches us. And let's start organizing. You know that there's a Team Warren on Twitter. They're everywhere, and they know what they're doing. So hit them up. Tell them you're interested. They will have a ground game, I guarantee you.
Absolutely. And Erin, I just have to say that, going in directly after the election, doing the hard work right now, and then catching them flat-footed, that was the key to our win. That's why we became the only campaign in Michigan in 2018 that got more donations than Gretchen Whitmer. That's why we were able to collect 110 signatures, or in 110 days, collect 440,000 signatures when our opposition thought we might be able to get 330 in 180 days. We were frankly resting, enjoying hot chocolate for a couple of weeks because we put in the work early, and we knew we were still going to come back and win the thing. So if we're working next year and the year after that, the Republicans aren't going to know what hit them. And we're going to be able to get some real meaningful change. This midterm goes the right way, and it's going to be a completely different discussion when it comes to policy, and it's going to be, frankly, a few former Republicans begging for compromise, and then us figuring out what we're going to do.
That's awesome. I love it. So what I heard there, guys, is organize early, party when we win.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome, Joe. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to get organizing. Have a good rest of your day.